In October of 1962, the world did not know how close it was to disappearing. There were no warning sirens, no emergency broadcasts, no global countdown. Children went to school. Parents went to work. Lights turned on and off across American cities, as they always had. And yet, behind closed doors in Washington, the fate of humanity rested on a single, terrifying truth. Nuclear war was no longer a theory. It was a possibility, measured in minutes. 90 miles from the coast of Florida, the Soviet Union had crossed a line that had never been crossed before. Hidden among palm trees and sugar fields, nuclear missiles were being assembled in Cuba, weapons capable of striking the heart of the United States with almost no warning. New York, Washington, Chicago. Millions of lives balanced on launch keys controlled by an enemy power. The Cold War, once distant and ideological, was now aimed directly at the American homeland. This was not an abstract threat. This was not political theater. This was the closest the world has ever come to total annihilation. When American intelligence confirmed the presence of those missiles, the United States faced a moment unlike any in its history. There were no precedents, no rule books, no margin for error. Any wrong decision could ignite a chain reaction that would end civilization itself. And at the center of this storm stood a young president, burdened with a responsibility no human being had ever carried before. John F. Kennedy understood immediately what was at stake. The United States possessed overwhelming military power. It could strike Cuba within hours. It could erase missile sites, bases, and entire cities. Many urged him to do exactly that. Generals argued that hesitation was weakness. Advisors warned that delay invited disaster. History seemed to demand force. But Kennedy understood something deeper, something that defines true American leadership. In a nuclear world, strength is not proven by who fires first. Strength is proven by who controls the moment. On October 22, 1962, Kennedy addressed the American people and the world. His words were calm, deliberate, unmistakable. He revealed the truth. Soviet nuclear missiles were in Cuba, and he made one thing absolutely clear. The United States would not accept them. Any missile launched from Cuba would be considered an attack by the Soviet Union itself, requiring a full American response. It was not a bluff. It was not rhetoric. It was resolve. Yet what followed was not reckless aggression. It was calculated authority. Instead of ordering an immediate attack, Kennedy chose a strategy that stunned both allies and enemies. The United States Navy would establish a strict naval quarantine around Cuba, not a blockade, because a blockade meant war, but a quarantine. Every word mattered. Every move was deliberate. American warships moved into position, not to provoke conflict, but to prevent it. And the most powerful navy in human history stood ready, disciplined, silent, unyielding. For 13 days, the world hovered on the edge of oblivion. American forces were placed on the highest alert short of nuclear war. DEFCON 2, one step away. Fighter jets waited on runways. Submarines prowled the oceans. Missile crews stood by their consoles, prepared to execute orders that could never be undone. The United States was ready, not eager, but ready. And then came October 27th, 1962, the most dangerous day of the Cold War. An American U-2 reconnaissance plane was shot down over Cuba. Its pilot was killed instantly. The news hit Washington like a thunderclap. This was the spark that could ignite everything. Military leaders demanded immediate retaliation. Plans were ready. Forces were in place. The machinery of war was primed. History waited to see if America would lose control. Kennedy did not blink. Instead of unleashing destruction, he doubled down on restraint. He understood that the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, was under pressure of his own, trapped between pride, fear, and the reality of American resolve. Kennedy searched not for domination, but for a way to end the crisis without surrendering principle. Behind the scenes, diplomacy moved with surgical precision. Messages were exchanged, lines were opened, exits were offered. And then The moment came. On October 28, 1962, Khrushchev announced that Soviet missiles would be dismantled and removed from Cuba. The ships turned back. The launch sites were taken apart. The immediate threat to the United States and to the world was over. No cities were destroyed. No bombs were dropped. No nuclear fire scorched the planet. This was not luck. This was not chance. This was American leadership. The Cuban Missile Crisis stands as one of the greatest demonstrations of power guided by responsibility in human history. The United States did not win by violence. It won by credibility, by discipline, by making it clear that it would not be pushed and would not panic. When the world stood on the brink, America held it together. The aftermath reshaped global politics. Direct communication lines were established between Washington and Moscow. Nuclear testing agreements followed. Even America's enemies understood a new reality. The United States was not reckless, but it was immovable when its core security was threatened. This is why Americans remember 1962 with pride. Because when the unthinkable became possible, when fear threatened to overpower reason, and when history demanded leadership of the highest order, the United States rose to the moment. Calm under pressure, firm without arrogance, powerful without losing control. The world survived because America did not flinch. Because when the fate of humanity rested on a decision, the United States chose resolve over chaos, leadership over fear, and responsibility over destruction. And that is why, more than 60 years later, October 1962 is remembered not as the month the world almost ended, but as the moment America proved it could be trusted to lead it. What makes October 1962 so extraordinary is not only how close the world came to destruction, but how clearly it revealed the character of the United States when it mattered most. This was a nation that possessed the power to end the crisis through force, yet chose a harder path, the path of control. At a moment when fear dominated headlines and panic whispered in every home, America demonstrated something rarer than military might, the ability to lead without losing itself. This restraint was not weakness. It was confidence forged by values, institutions, and an unshakable belief in responsibility. Across the globe, allies watched Washington closely. In Europe, nations that still carried the scars of 2 world wars understood what nuclear escalation would mean. In Asia, countries caught between a superpowers waited anxiously to see whether civilization itself would survive the rivalry. And everywhere, one question echoed quietly but urgently. Could any nation be trusted with this much power? In those 13 days, the United States answered that question, not with speeches, but with action. Calm action. Disciplined action. Action guided by principle. The Soviet leadership expected intimidation to work. They believed proximity would create panic, that placing missiles within striking distance of American cities would force concessions, confusion, or reckless overreaction. Instead, they encountered something far more formidable, a nation that refused to be cornered emotionally. American resolve was not loud. It did not need to be. It was steady, unmistakable, and impossible to ignore. Every Soviet move was met not with hysteria, but with clarity, not with chaos, but with order. Inside the United States, citizens felt the tension, but they also felt trust. Trust that their institutions would hold. Trust that their leaders understood the gravity of the moment. Trust that America would not abandon its principles even when the stakes were existential. This trust did not come from propaganda. It came from history, from a nation that had repeatedly stepped forward in humanity's darkest hours and chosen responsibility over ruin. When the crisis ended, the world did not celebrate with parades or victory speeches. Instead, there was something deeper, relief mixed with respect. Respect for a country that had shown the discipline to stop when it could have destroyed. Respect for leadership that understood that true strength lies not in domination, but in restraint backed by certainty. The Cuban Missile Crisis changed how power was measured. From that moment on, leadership was no longer about who could strike first, but who could prevent the strike altogether. The legacy of 1962 still shapes the modern world. The communication channels created afterward, the nuclear treaties that followed, and the unspoken rules that governed superpower confrontation all trace back to those 13 days. And at the center of that legacy stands the United States, not as an aggressor, but as a stabilizing force when stability was nearly impossible. America proved that it could carry the weight of global responsibility without dropping it.